Post-dated check. In banking, a post-dated check is a check written by the drawer, payer, for a date in the future. Whether a post-dated check may be cashed or deposited before the date written on it depends on the country. A Canadian bank, for example, is not supposed to process a post-dated check, and if it does so by mistake, the check writer may ask their bank to correct the error. In the United States and the UK, post-dated checks are negotiable instruments and can be drawn upon at any time, while in India and Australia post-dated checks are not payable until the date written on the check. Practices in various countries. Australia. Under Australian law, a post-dated check is valid under the Checks and Payment Orders Act 1986. As well, under Section 61 of the Act, Part 2 reads, "The Commonwealth Bank of Australia's Rules and Conditions for Checks, 2014, Section 1.7.6 Dishonour of checks, clearly state that a check will be dishonoured if it is presented before the post date is written on the check for the reason that the check bears a date that is in the future. This is known as a post-dated check, and it cannot be paid until that date arrives." While this is a sound interpretation of Australian Commonwealth law, for insurance reasons the bank protects itself from possible attack with the condition, 2014, Section 1.7.1 using your checks: you authorize us to pay a post-dated check, one which is dated with a date in the future, drawn on your account and presented for payment at any time before the date of the check arrives. The Australian Tax Office require that checks made for tax payments must not be post-dated. The Australian Federal Police in their information to small businesses on avoiding fraud advise, do not accept post-dated or predated checks. Brazil. In Brazil, the drawer may seek damages in justice if their check is cashed in before its due date, according to the jurisprudential orientation of the Superior Court of Justice, as per summary number 370 of such court. Canada. Under the clearing rules of the Canadian Payments Association, a post-dated check cannot be cashed prior to the date written on it. If a Canadian financial institution inadvertently accepts and processes a check before the due date, the check writer may ask his or her financial institution to return the amount until the day before the check should have been cashed. India. Post-dated checks in Indian law are considered under the Negotiable Instruments Act, 1881. Post-dated checks are common and enforceable. In 1998, the Supreme Court ruled that a post-dated check is a bill of exchange and does not become payable on demand until the date written on the check. In India, the issue is complex and mainly revolves around Section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act, 1881. The two major issues before the courts are: 1. Post-dated checks that are stopped by the bank or issuer, causing problems for whoever is to be paid by the check for goods or services provided, and 2. The reverse, in which a person is promised goods or services but does not receive them and has to stop the check. Serbia. In Serbia, post-dating checks is a customary practice in the retail industry. The retailers will usually accept post-dated monthly check payment installments up to several months in advance, allowing their customers to pay for expensive goods as a sort of a line of no interest credit. UK. In the UK, the legislation is clear: a check is a bill of exchange drawn on a bank or payable on demand. Under the Bills of Exchange and Banking Act 1882, Part 10, bills of exchange are payable on demand, and in Part 13, a bill is not invalid by reason only that it is antedated or post-dated. In the United Kingdom, post-dating a check carries no legal weight, and so such a check can be cashed before the due date. However, a bank may refuse to honor a check if the post-date is noticed. Otherwise, the payer has no right to take any form of legal action against the bank for letting the check be processed. It is common for the terms and conditions of current accounts to state that post-dated checks should not be written and will be dishonoured if detected. In some instances, a post-dated check may be retained by the bank and paid on the due date if that date is only a few days away. Some UK organisations do not accept post-dated checks, as well as some government departments, while paying income tax or voluntary national insurance may only be done with post-dated checks with permission from Revenue and Customs. United States. In the United States, national banks are permitted to pay checks even though payment occurs prior to the date of the check. According to the Comptroller of the currency, a check is a negotiable instrument. The payee, the person to whom the check is written, may negotiate it through the banking system at any time, and check writers seeking redress must restrict themselves to pursuing the payee. Nonetheless, if the customer has given notice to the bank of the post-dating describing the check with reasonable certainty, the Uniform Commercial Code requires that the notice to be honored. In practice, whether the check writer has any redress against the financial institution where the payee deposited the check may depend on whether it can be shown that the check was accepted over the counter without examination.